Alright, so today just going to do a quick tutorial on how to do a custom transmission, or the way that I do them. So first things first, go to your BeamNG vehicles folder. This usually is located in my documents. Pick the car that you want to make the transmission for. So in this instance we will do it for the Grand Marshal. Now that is under full size. Now I like to keep all my own personal mods in their own folder, so just for the interest of this we're going to create a blank document from scratch, and I'll show you how to port the code from my base files to whatever car you want. So for this we're going to open up Notepad++, which doesn't want to work for whatever reason, so we'll just go into manually into the program when my computer decides to load. Alrighty, so if this is second nature to anyone who's done coding, but you need a start and an end colon for the file, so like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to your BeamNG Steam folder, which will be located in wherever you've installed it to. So here's mine. So Steam Apps, Common, BeamNG.Drive, and Content. Now we want to go into Vehicles, and then we want to open the zip folder for whichever car you want to use a transmission from as a base. So we're going to do the Grand Marshal, so full size.zip. And now sometimes the transmissions are in the engine file, sometimes they're in their old. For this they're in their own transmission file. Now we'll use a 4-speed automatic as a base. All we really need this for is things like the beams, the props, the nodes, the flex bodies. This will dictate which shift is used in the game, the shape of it under the car, etc, etc, because all we're doing is changing the code for it as to like how the gearbox reacts and so on and so forth. So you want to highlight that, so you need to go from here all the way down to here and then paste it. You'll have something that looks sort of like that. Now it is very important that this description name here, whatever you want to call it, the ID tag, needs to be unique. It cannot, if it's the same as whatever's in the game, it will clash and overwrite the file in the game. So for this we'll just call it a tutorial to the end of it. We'll give it a name so we know what we're doing with it as well. Change the name. Now this name here is what will show up in the game. This here's a slot that it uses in the game, and these are slots from within the transmission, so if you want to have change the torque converter, etc. Now for this instance we're actually going to be getting rid of this. So for this instance what I'm going to do is we'll open up my a trans file. Actually just for this I'll use the trans from another car just to show how it works. So for this we want to go into my trans file, open this up, pick whichever one you want to use. So for this instance we'll use a 6-speed just for shits and giggles. So you want to copy from powertrain, you want the controller because that's what dictates the transmission having a trans brake, variables, gearbox, torque converter, all the way down to vehicle controller. So copy that, and we literally just overwrite those same parts, including slots, overwrite those same parts from there, so like that. So then your transmission file will look like this. I'll just change that name quickly. So now it's this code here, it allows you to select whatever gear like the game might lock you out of any gear that you use, so need that, very important. So we will save that. It'll ask where you want to save it. Now it needs to go inside whichever vehicle you're using it for. In this instance it's full size. Doesn't matter if you put it in a subfolder. So for this, and then what we want to do is we want to give it a name, so we'll just call it whatever you want. I just try to keep them pretty easy to read, so trans underscore tutorial I'll call this one. So now you have to select all types here, and you have to add .jbeam to the end. Very important, otherwise it won't work. Now, so saved. So what we're going to do is we're going to load whichever car we're using it for, Grand Marshal, whatever. Doesn't matter which preset you use because it should work for any of them. Right, so just as a bit of a test, this is how the standard one drives. So notice we can't manually select gears outside of first and second, and then drive obviously. So you want to reset your car. Oops. So I'm just loading up my Xbox controller because it makes it much easier to reset the car. Rightio. So now go into your parts changer, frame. Now where the transmission is a bit different for some cars, but generally it's in the engine, transmission, and then there it is, there's one we had. Now what you use as far as the settings in here is going to be different for every single car. I'll run through all the settings quickly. This first one here is gear change time. This dictates how long the transmission takes to change, like physically select different, like between gears. I personally like to have this as tight as possible. Converter diameter, it's actually physically how big the converter is. Bigger converters will be tighter, have more clamp pressure, but much harder to get into your desired rev range. You need to play around with this depending on which car you have. For this I'll just select something pretty small just to try and illustrate it. Converter stiffness I'll leave like as however it is in the file. Coupling AV ratio I'll leave. Lock-up clutch torque is how much clamp pressure the lock-up clutch has. Lock-up gear is what gear it engages in. Lock-up RPM is what RPM in that gear that it engages in. Smoothing up and down I'll leave, and stall torque is how hard the car leaves the line. So I'll just accept this now so you can see how the smaller converter drives. So a smaller converter will flare a lot more. So now we know that's too tight. Now you can engage the trans brake, and this will help you know where your stall RPM is at. So we know it's too tight because it just goes straight to red line. Now what we'll do is we'll make it a bit tighter. Hit apply, retry it. That's not bad. So you'll need to play around as to where you want this to engage. For the purpose of this test, I'll disable the lock-up clutch. Now, I'd turn this all the way to high gear. If you change it to a gear outside of what the transmission has, so for example, if you have a 4-speed and you change it to gear 5, it won't engage at all. So this is how it drives with a, I guess you could call it a high stall. So you just drive along, stomp on it, it'll flush up. Very reminiscent of how high stall would work for a normal car. So now what we'll do here is we'll turn the lock-up clutch on. Now this is very good if you want a high stall but you don't want the slip between gears or whatever. So you can turn this lock-up clutch torque to whatever you want. Now for the purpose of this I'll turn it way up past where it should be. Say 3000 Newton meters. Now this is where gear change time will help, if you up the gear change time, it won't shift as firm, which is good for not banging gears, but for the purpose of this, well, yeah. So we'll turn around. So you're just driving along, second, so not as much flouts, but only partial throttle, so we'll do a full throttle run now. So that's pretty much how you would do that. Now, to make things interesting, we'll put some boost on the car. I like to use my custom turbo, just makes it a million times easier, but for the purpose of this, making it simple, we'll use a supercharger. Now, what we'll do is, I like the pitch to be around 0.55 to 0.65, and we'll just make it something like that. Might be too much boost for this motor, I'm not sure. Alrighty, so and that's pretty much how you do. You just need to play around and see how you want each car to behave as far as the transmission is concerned. Now, what might help is launching it in second or third, for instance. So we'll use the trans brake for this. So something like that. Now, for a supercharger, you'll generally need to go a much tighter converter than, say, a turbo car. Superchargers have instant torque, which means that you can use a much tighter converter, but for turbo cars, need a looser converter to help bring them up on boost. So we'll just put a slightly tighter converter in it. Okay, the trans brake like we did before. So like that. And that's pretty much the essence of how to do a custom transmission and some examples of how to set it up.